every universe, every universe. What if it is must have music common?
Hey, I don't know what's going on. So I'm just telling you that
Yeah,
it would be like if you ever play a video game and you're about to die because you run out of energy, but then all of a sudden there's an extra life or like energy pad in the future, and all I have to do is get to that extra life or the energy pad, and everything's gonna be okay. We're currently at the point where that energy pad for that extra life is within our grasp. It was not for perhaps our grandparents, great grandparents, or great great grandparents. They were almost there, but they weren't quite there yet. We are going to have to see that I grasp perhaps. And because of that, we may be able to control our destiny with very long lives.
because more people even access.
I know. Even let's say you didn't know me and I could make you rich and famous and everything. If you did a podcast today for the next 10 years, you would have over 3,000 podcasts.
Yeah,
That's 3,000 people who have audiences that would help you to network. You would be pretty rich and famous if you just did that. You know that, right? So that's what you have to
like
do.
with you is fast.
It is. With me, it is faster. Um, because with me, at any time, I could meet somebody and they find out what I'm doing and it will blow up. It would be the biggest event on the internet. And with you, you would be able to say to someone, all right, well, I've done 3,000 podcasts. Like, that's a lot of podcasts. And I'm like, yeah, but you're talking with like just random people about nothing or whatever. Um, and people could be able to say to me, okay, uh, well, all I see is just you sleeping, like what your mom says. And I'm saying, I'm like, okay, you see my streams when I was in Santa Barbara? They're like, no. Do you see my streams when I was in San Diego? And I'm like, no. Do you see my streams when I was in Beverly Hills? No. Do you see my streams at the Hollywood sign or at the Walk of Fame or my streams at Disneyland? No, I haven't seen any of those. Exactly. So you are only looking at a snapshot of what I'm doing right now. You haven't seen the totality. Have you seen the songs that I've sung, or the projects we've created, or the games that we've played, or the events that we've archived? No, I haven't seen any of that. Exactly, because you just have one small segment. If you go and start looking for what I have, it's going to be very interesting. And there is a saying in the media, it's called content is king. Whatever people have the most amount of something, they're the kings. And I have more content than anybody. Even these like little conversations that we're having, which are seemingly like I don't want to say meaningless, they have a lot of meaning to them, but like people of the future will study these in depth and they'll be like, wow, on this date, remember they had this conversation and Tony got a superhero cartoon or comic book made and they were talking about this girl and Tony eventually would end up marrying that girl and have children with that girl 1,000 years in the future. Like just as you were coming in, I was watching a documentary on. It's actually on the history of a certain video game. The video game is based on historical events, and they were just going through like people's diaries of like 150 years ago, and that's exactly what this is. This is just just a diary of my life, but also of world events, and it's like how would we put it? How would I describe? Uh, the only thing that I have is data. I but that's all I need. It's like uh, how would I describe it from my person standpoint. Um, it's it's like uh, if you were to take, let's just say, an elementary school class 50 years into the future, and you were to say to them, "All right, class, we have you can do whatever you want. Uh, some kids might want to watch sports. Some kids might want to talk about technology. Some kids might want to watch video games. But you would say to the kids, okay, you can do all that, but eventually you're going to run out of videos that they have. Or we have this other person, and they made all this content that you could spend 100 years watching their videos and you still won't watch them all. The kids are going to be like, that one, it's unlimited. It's like infinite lives. It's like unlimited content. Uh, it's like you could drink. You could drink at this fountain, and it would always be replenished. The other fountains are like a water bottle, or a gallon of water, or a trough. But mine is an infinite fountain, and you can always drink at and get something new out.
Mister, Mister.
All right, big dog. So, from a a girl standpoint, it's okay. Look, there's this saying that I really like that uh, everybody, there's somebody out there for everyone or whatever. If they're not with you right now, it may never happen, but maybe they're just learning what to compare you against, so that when you are together, she recognizes, oh, Tony does this better. He makes me laugh more. He has more confidence. He's funnier. He's more intelligent. He has more foresight. He's a better father. And I would not know how great Tony is if I didn't have the experience with this other guy. Does that make sense? Yeah, there you go. And Tony, if you have to say to yourself, if you really want this girl, even without the help of Rabbi, all you need to do is do a podcast a day, or I know it's difficult, but for the next 10 years, just like you've done for like almost 3 years with chess, you do a podcast like that, and you would be famous on your own. You know that, right? There's no other chess influencer out there who has done 3,000 podcasts, and you're young enough that you could do that. And you're already getting paid to do podcasts. I know not a lot, but a little bit. And you have to say, okay, it took you 35 podcasts to start making a little money. By 350 podcasts, you probably have at least one sponsor. And by 3,500 podcasts, you're going to have a mansion. And you know how these podcasts work. It's not like they go away. So people's views build on each other. And the longer that you know, you're very, you're a beautiful soul. You're short minded though. You're like, oh, this got 10 views, or this got 20 views, or this got views. The reason why it didn't get a million views is because the algorithm did not put it in front of a million different people. If it felt that the algorithm wanted to promote your content, it would. It's about not necessarily the result. The result will come. If you did 300 podcasts, there's there are people who will start to just go through all your podcasts. I watched this one podcast, and I've watched all of them. There are like 750 of them. I've watched all the podcasts just about like two or three times, and they're each like an hour, hour and a half long. It's a comedy podcast. This comedy podcast has made these guys into multi-billionaires, and they've only put out 750 of them. But it's a lesson to me. I look at their early podcasts, and they were like making minimum wage. They had nothing. They just were like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a microphone and we're gonna have people come up and tell us jokes for 60 seconds, and we're gonna critique them. And they started that 13 years ago. And they're multimillionaires now. They play the biggest facilities in the United States and the world. They played in Europe. They played the O2 Arena. They played Madison Square Garden. They played in Australia. Every major English-speaking country they played. They've been able to tour the world because they just said to themselves, every Monday night, no matter what, we're going to put out a podcast. And they do. And they've been very successful at it. And that's why I say to you can just say to yourself, every day, I'm going to interview somebody, even if it's the mailman or the person giving coffee or whatever. And like that's fascinating. And people will enjoy that. Even more than in many ways, they'll enjoy um, the chief of police or the UFC fighter. There's a podcaster in the United States, and he has interviewed he's interviewed the president, he's interviewed the vice president, and those get big uh, those get big people who listen to them. But then the ones that the people like the most are the ones where he interviews a school lunch lady or a trash man or a plumber. Those ones people love as those are the ones that people have on repeat all the time. They love them. They love the stories. They're human. You're doing the same thing.
That's right.
Okay, big dog. I'm not going to talk to you about anymore. Get out those podcasts and or that. Try to publish one today. You've got the description. You have to put together a thumbnail, and then you start a new playlist, and you have one thing in the playlist. But then maybe within the next week you publish another one, and another one, and another one. I imagine those. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. At first, we're not going to get a lot of people watching those because they're not they're kind of boring. But uh, once we get 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 of them, there will be people who just search for this stuff and just listen to them all the time. That's going to be interesting. Kind of an interesting thing for people.
That's
All right, Victor. When you go publishing, I'm going to watch the document. And if you need,
okay. Okay. You have okay. I'm not doing okay.
tell me whatever you want to do.
Like I am talking my head, and you are like the guy from the my store whoever fresh rice and and you are like fresh things always.
Yes, that's right. I'm like the top.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You're right. Did you ever watch Lord of the Rings? Do you know what Lord of the Rings
I don't have question.
is?
No,
Um, I'm like, there's a character in it. He's a wizard. I'm like that. You're like you're like you're on your road, and I give you magic. I give you like, oh, this is what you want. Well, like the thing with the comic book. You were with your friend or whatever, and like you were able to put together exactly what you wanted for a comic book within 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like all you have to say to me is, "How do I do this?" And I give you away how to do it. Like we did, like when we met, you weren't even on Spotify. You considered yourself to be a podcaster, and you weren't on the biggest podcasting platform in the world.
True.
And now you are, and you will get more and more motivated when people are like, "Oh yeah, Tony, I heard about you from whatever. I saw you on whatever. Um, you had an interview or whatever. I thought that was really, or it affected me." So, um, yeah. So you can always come to me. I mean, generally, I'm always great, but I will help to build you up and give you ideas right now.
Like, how can I help you? I think it is only one way to go. Friendship. How can I benefit you? I
You,
can.
you keep coming in here. That gives me immense benefit. I get joy out of helping other people. And if I don't have other people, I can't get joy. By the way, our friend Zoo, he's going to be on your podcast. But get this, he's going to be in a movie. Zoo. Zoo is also an actor. He's also a comedian. And I would say the biggest comedian in Australia asked him yesterday to be in his movie. And so once probably like once he is in this movie, we'll have you interview him and he can tell you everything what it's like to be on set, what it's like with these famous people. But that's going to be really interesting. Anyway, helping helping people, we get a lot of joy out of it. And how you help me, you give me someone who I can help. Like the fact that you were like, I want to put together a comic book, and I was able to show you this. And I hear your reaction. Ooh, look at this. This is Jude. This is cool. Yeah, you get joy out of it.
Thank you. I really
All right, now go publish that,
yeah.
and if you need help here, but you got some editing to do, so if you don't get it all
Yeah.
published today, I understand. Um, but do your best, and if you need my help, I'm here for you. Okay.
Okay. I talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Good. Bye. Yo, what's going on? How are you liking it? Let me know. You- I math classes. Sometimes it's just a reward. So I wasn't on the project. One of my co he couldn't. Let me guess. We're gonna day long. Every it never stops. Off across Minnesota, which wanted to share Oregon with the rest of them. So, with permission from which submitted for publication in a popular computer magazine, and with it came an unofficial name, popularized by the schools employee Oregon Trail. Computing classes, permission from the code in their magazine. As software could be I figured out code or something. You could tell as he did where they were supposed to be. I've got every remember exactly. But I realized at the time, okay, I'm going to do this. But it wasn't until the introduction of a revolutionary new piece of technology that the Oregon Trail truly began its cross-country journey. Instructional coordinators went to California and came back saying, you know, I went out to this conference in California and I saw something on the side of a small box that does everything each computer up there on the floor does, except it does it in color. He was talking about the Apple II microcomputer. The Apple friends. In 1977, Apple introduced a new personal computer, often called microcomputers. It was aimed at the everyday consumer. Called it the Apple II. For around $1,200, a user could have a computer that fit on a desk in their very own home. And Apple wasn't alone. That same year, Commodore released the PET Tandy Radio Shack offered the Taylor Escape. It was the beginning of a new era in the computer industry. Mac quickly took notice. They recognized that the affordability and power of a microcomputer would make it a great addition to the classroom, allow them to slowly phase out their large, expensive telecommunication network. Mac decided to set up a statewide purchasing contract for one particular microcomputer brand. So they solicited bids from multiple hardware vendors. But Apple had the winning offer. Between 1978 and 1979, Mac sold more than 500 Apple II computers to Minnesota schools. Gave them half
largest hardware. Other states followed mentally and acquired Apple computers for their own schools. The microcomputer industry boomed. Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, would later claim that one of the things that built Apple IIs was schools and buying Apple IIs. The rise of personal computers was also good news for many, thanks to their growing educational software library. As schools in other states acquired computers, turned to Mac for educational software. So the organization converted their software library with BASIC to Apple II BASIC, sold games on discs. Oregon Trail, their most popular title, was one of the first games they converted.
So the original version was I really have the original only game. It was no longer 100% but the main difference from the original was that the shooting activity had been put into a graphical context. So if you were hunting for food, a little deer slowly moved across the screen. You could press spacebar. You could be attacked by wolves, or you could be attacked by bad, or you could be attacked by what they call hostile riders. You could choose any of these two. Otherwise, it was pretty much a direct port from the original picture version that Rothschild and his colleagues had created. With a few small tweaks here and there that were important.
Mac's conversion team worked their way through the back catalog of software, began offering software compilations to schools. Oregon Trail became one of 5 titles in the Elementary Volume 6 Social Studies collection. Mac sold these discs to schools around the country. They even offered them for sale to consumers through magazines like Creative Computing.
Mac started producing discs. There was some potential for them to be used outside the state. We started getting it very smart users, particularly from Iowa. Iowa wanted to license them all of the discs that was to but this was all where they were not going to have the company was getting constrained by selling the product outside the state to other individual districts or other states. Absolutely license. Of course, or just a license. So again, they didn't know they could make unlimited copies of their software or no use during those products.
Thanks to software licensing and sales, people made a lot of money. So much so, in fact, that the higher-ups at MEC made a proposition to the state. MEC proposed that they would turn themselves into a company fully owned by the state of Minnesota. This would remove all government subsidies, but allow MEC to hire more staff with no strict government regulations. They could offer bonuses, commissions, higher salaries, and more. In addition, MEC would still provide hardware and software at a steep discount to Minnesota schools. All of these changes would help MEC compete in the fast-growing software business. In 1984, the Minnesota State Legislature approved the measure. MEC became known as the Minnesota Educational Computing Corporation. Dale Friends, who was now the vice president of MEC, was ready to lead the company into new territory, the home consumer market. For their first wave of retail products, one title stood out above the rest: Oregon Trail.
There were two primary reasons that Mac decided early in 1984 to create a conversion of the first reason is that they wanted entertaining, and educational. Let's emphasize those ideas.
Finally, the game had to be built for the Apple II computer.
So that was a big challenge. We had to do things, tiny little keypads, and these tiny little floppy disks that went up 128 gigabytes. How do we get it to all fit?
With those objectives, Bouchard assembled his team.
There were 5 of us at first. So I was team leader, lead designer. Shirley Karen was an experienced teacher. He also had a pretty own manual. John Krantz was the lead programmer. Charlotte Caplinger was the lead graphic designer. That meant she did virtually all the art and appears in the product. And then finally, we had John Krantz, who was 6 months programming, and he created the first prototype that we did for the TV. So at the time when our team first got started on the Oregon Trail, I was very interested in speaking with John Rothschild. He was still on staff, so I went over to his office and spoke with him. I wanted to get his take on, wow, what did you think about this? What were his thoughts as to what we might do? We're going to take fall weekly meetings. He got up there and he said, he break the boundaries, different divisions of the fact, since he wasn't a software engineer. He was just going to hand back and let us take it over. He said, I think you've got a good team. I think you're going to do a great job. So don't worry.
To begin, Bouchard and his team got feedback from their target demographic, children. They wanted to know what made the Oregon Trail so special.
Why do you like to go on the trail? What is it? With PLC. And the boys would enthusiastically answer, hunting. But I hunted. That was the universal answer. Our girls, interestingly, were fun. And half the girls would carry the game. Then when we started observing the kids playing, we could see it wasn't just the shooting that was attractive. 2/3 of the kids were thinking about getting hard. So we could see that the resource management aspect was a key part. Making sure that your kids had your supplies, and at no time you allowed anything to run out, because that would be certain death in that game. The other thing was the fact that after we contributed some random thing, see what happened that was usually bad. And they kind of kept on the edge of their seats. What's going to happen this time? What's going to happen this time? So those 2 aspects turned out to be what I thought was goodwill. And this goal of surviving all the way to Oregon, watching your resources, it was a conflict.
With the feedback, Bouchard envisioned a new foundation for the game.
The initial game was based on a 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks of pass, things we haven't done to pass, and so on. This particular structure did not facilitate the inclusion of any action geography, because you couldn't know where you would be in 2 weeks. I wanted a game that was heavily based on geography. Instead of being an idea of like say first man put a bunch of different things first, dividing the trail into about 16 segments, each getting a landmark. One side was in this idea of a landmark thing. The game structure the team bought into it. Shirley and I, we both started coming up with a list of different things that people would anticipate along the way. There were 4 of course. There were a lot of different paradoxes. But there was a lot of geographical features that people wanted to see. Jimmy Roth made the most famous. But they were still an issue because I wanted the player to be able to react immediately if they ran out of food or something happened. I wanted things to be able to happen between landmarks. For the first episode, that was it. In addition to the landmark cycle, I had a daily cycle going underneath. And all the daily formulas for the reconfigured every day. How much food do you have left? What is the current health? What's the current weather on this particular date? But the next problem was knowing it. 150 pounds of starting points on the trail. That's 2 times 2. What if from landmark to landmark, you just you continue to take all the data up to the screen and see all the different variables changing, the left, and so on. But anytime you can stop it, and then what you are forced to add every single day, what you want to do next.
The new system simulated a day-to-day journey along the Oregon Trail. Bouchard and Shirley Karen also expanded on random events that happened daily along the trail. A thief could steal supplies, or a member of the wagon party might break their arm. Some experiences were positive, such as stumbling on wild fruit. It made the journey more exciting. Players on their toes. Still, Bouchard felt like things were simply happening to the player. He wanted to give people more agency. A journey to Oregon.
Originally, I didn't know it was. There wasn't much opportunity for decision making. Basically, each 2-week period, you decided, do I want to do it or not? And how much would it be? Otherwise, most of things happening between the new product. I wanted to take that great beginning to expand it to the users who was less more decision making potential. Part of it was including resources. Additional things that in terms of how resources are being used. Spare part. Those three things that are spare part. Because as I was reading through the research, I saw how often things broke down the trail.
Bouchard also gave players more things to do while traveling. They could set their pace and retrace some resources or rest for a few days to recover from injuries. The one player decision became a tense experience. River crossings.
River crossings occur in the original product, these were based on how much rivers you had crossed. And these rivers differed in their distance, they differed in how wide they were, and how average depth during the course of the year, depth of the water. Some had very intervals of none. Some had helpful equipment that could help you cross. Some didn't have that. What a wonderful opportunity. Something where you have to decide how you're going to cross. Once you put in the animations, it became a nail-biting experience. You can see waiting precision, starting from the river, and you're waiting, and they're going to make it. And then as you cross the night, turns over, way across the far shore. So it's a very exciting aspect of the game, as well as being an important historical educational opportunity.
But for many kids, the most exciting part of Oregon Trail was still the hunt. Bouchard wanted to ensure they got it right.
In the original, shooting at humans that included not just hunting food, but also shooting and attacking animals like wolves, shooting and attacking people. When I finished shooting in the original game, for the new game, I decided to narrow that down just to in part because from my research I couldn't find any evidence of actual attacks by wild animals on the trail, and nor frontal attacks by bandits or Native Americans. I think that was occurred with any frequency whatsoever. I don't want it to be this game similar to a genuine arcade style game, like you might find an Apple II if you are an arcade style game, or if you went to an actual arcade game. I wanted to feel more like that. I worked with John Kranz and Bob Hampton, who teammates and three got together and brainstormed ideas. Created a little prototype that illustrated concepts. The problem, though, was that it could be the soft base. It would have required single language programming, which is a bit more requires a specialist programmer. My boss gave me permission to do this, and we brought in another team, Roger, specifically to program this thing. When Roger first programmed the game, we didn't have the dead animal graphics already. It was kind of programmed again, he was still upside down, showing an animal that was shot as a temporary pattern. It was so cute, we liked that. But we decided, what happened to the dead animal graphics and we tried to collapse to a level. That wasn't very effective. It turned out that it was just to put the animal upside down. And it made for a more entertaining game, and it would happen.
With all of the updates, the Oregon Trail game became more and more interactive. But Bouchard couldn't forget that the game was also meant to teach students about the people who made the journey, the hardships they experienced.
So in the original game, one of the things that really caught my attention was that it almost gave me the illusion that you were on the trail. Mentions of other people were very rare. I don't want to be left other people describing as you. And these other people, their family members, came up with this idea. Why don't we name these people in U.S. players? Now we provide their own name. We provide the name of these other 5 people. And then, feeling connected to the individual people. Sickness was a real sickness and accidents and then cause death. What diseases, vegetables, We could watch the kids. They would almost always play with the names of their siblings or their family members. And they were charged about him. It was very personal for a lot of them. And it really motivated them to try harder the next time. But one of the things that we had to meet other people along the way. These people would be other immigrants who would be in different backgrounds. It could be soldiers or traders who were in a particular fort or their landmark. It could be Native Americans who lived in the area or they were interested in trade. It's very bad when you interact with them and hear their stories.
Employers managed to make it to the last part of the journey. At the Dolls landmark, they were given a surprise. A choice on which route to take.
One is to raft down the Columbia River. Another one is to take the Barlow Road, we run the toll road. And this is the reality, it's the actual reality that the travelers on the trail face. And I wanted the game to have kind of a big phenomenon. So to make this a big phenomenon, we have the rafting game, we raft down the river. We had to survive to take the Barlow toll road. I was envisioning some other games. And a lot of these games have very much to do with different game-playing styles. So how about a puzzle game in which you're trying to get your point of view a big village on the other side, which is absolutely true on the Barlow toll road, using the ropes, levers, okays, again, absolutely true. This is an opportunity here.
But due to time and technical constraints, those games had to be modified or moved altogether.
So I got permission finally to do it. Really stripped out for asking games. At least the beauty was the Barlow toll road operated the same way as the rest of the game. So we never got enough games that ropes levers.
Players managed to survive the rafting over the toll road. They made it to Oregon, beating the game.
But then when the player got hit, all of a sudden we revealed that the scoring system of the game was you can see that they had a score section that they were already a list higher than them. So now all of a sudden they were back. Because of the creative homework, and I needed to do all kinds of different ways to play it again. I wanted to look for it still and give it 3 different it's easy to play. Start with one work. Also, as you want to be prepared, the implication that each one would keep a different amount of money.
Players couldn't complete the journey. They were given the option to write out their tombstone. A fun, great way to show a game of pursuit.
So the tombstone keep away from the rock. The door had already closed in our game. When you had these, you were instead through. I think it was Shirley Carroll who brought up the idea that he had been reading about how the boys had to read science and when they were products. We had this idea of what if after kind of recognized the regular tombstone. This tombstone that you write would be stored on the tips. And then the next time you play that scene, you could see where you had last time that your own tombstone. Or in the school, where the many kids like it plays the same minutes. The next kid needs that disc could see the tombstone of the previous player if they got far enough player time. And kids loved it. It was a big success. And one of the nice things about it is that if you're tired of the web, why don't you listen to the standing still thing? This would have been a little bit of fun writing tombstones.
By February of 1985, 6 months after development began, the team was finally ready to start testing an early build of the game.
We decided to test it at school. Went to a 6th grade classroom. That was basically one of the tests of each of the kids we worked with. We paired them up on computers. I would tell them, we have this product we're going to finish. You guys are going to help us find out what's working, what's not working. And we found that they really liked the game. There were a lot of things that went successfully, but they were bored by the travel screen. Now the purpose of the travel screen is to show time. That's why you're looking for one network to allow the user looking by data screen. Kids were not interested in just looking at boxes of data. On TV, they're So we used that as a centerpiece of the screen, built a whole new ground screen. It was great. It worked very well. It paid a lot of attention to the screen. They paid more attention to the animation and to the numbers. They paid some attention to the numbers, and they were very engaged. And interestingly, yeah, it became the most famous screen on the product. So thanks, Bill.
Thanks to their testing, the development team also found a potential major problem with the tombstones. This build had learned from the original game. During development, sometimes you don't think about the devious things kids will do.
We sent out these beta copies of the product to various schools for them to try out and let us know what they liked, what they didn't like, what were the issues, what worked well. And the teacher looked back and said, oh my goodness, just as good with Fanny on it. And one of your agents was Fanny on Tuesday. Uh-oh, so I couldn't each have copies of this. No, there's no even a tombstone. So I went back to her and said, no, my students would never do that. But regardless, probably was going to happen in other classrooms as well. Okay, we're going to add another part to the teacher interface, to the teacher face on here, in which you can reset high school events. Allow them to reset the tombstone to, so they say, blow the tombstones like that. And you have the fact that
A final bug check, which included a company-wide contest to find the best issues in exchange for cash prizes, solidified everything. 10 months after development started, the game was finally ready. In July of 1985, Beck released their new version of the Oregon Trail for the Apple II. On this 2,000-mile, 6-month period, there was no Gulf service station, Holiday Inns, or Dairy Queens. All the travelers had to anticipate those landmarks. 102 miles of the Kansas River crossing, 83 miles of the Big Blue River crossing, 119 miles to Montgomery, 250 miles to Chimney Rock, carcasses of dead oxen and mules, discarded belongings, shallow graves, and the ruts of the Great East Wagon Wheel. Japanese software company took a chance and licensed the game for a Japanese release. In the United States, Oregon Trail became a cultural phenomenon, thanks in musical art to its millions in classrooms across the country. Anyone who grew up in the 80s and 90s most likely played some version of the game at school.
I remember when I went to meet that my daughter was moving to Oregon, and I went to watch her scene, and I was on the track team here. Suddenly there was this commotion that they keep on running over me. I said, "Did you run Oregon Trail, really?" So they had leaving on I guess when I realized it's just out of a random group of kids that they all like Oregon Trail and they all thought it was great. Maybe something more pervasive in society than I could imagine at that point. The kids are just the other day I was in class. He says, "You're a trail guy, right?" So just, I don't know what it is. I have no idea. It's such an expensive audience of people who have played it. It's like to touch that many people is kind of humbling in that way. Even though the game is way different than the original. To be a popular game, 2 years, and then I never anticipated talking about it 35 years later.
Oregon Trail's success to dominate the school software market. But in the retail world, things were different. While Apple II was the primary computer used in schools, at home, other platforms reigned supreme. More and more options available to consumers. Prices were coming down. Apple II was also beginning to show its age. It was only a matter of time before schools upgraded to new computers. In order to compete, Mac had to start porting their games to other platforms. In 1990, 5 years after the Apple II release, Mac finally ported Oregon Trail and other popular titles to new platforms, such as MS-DOS. But it seemed too little, too late. Nicholas Friends, who is now the president and CEO of Mac, the company was, quote, "built to eat alive." It needed investment capital to develop new titles, or games to other platforms, expand their distribution. But the state of Minnesota didn't provide any additional funding and decided to sell the company. In 1991, a venture capital group called the North American Fund II backed for $5.25 million. 3 years later, in March of 1994, went public, raised more than $22 million. It was a huge success. Oregon Trail continued to be a motivator for Mac. The company worked on sequels, spin-off games that featured the same concepts, such as Amazon Trade. At one point, Oregon Trail games accounted for 33% of Mac's revenue. Meanwhile, the original creators of Oregon Trail, Don Rowland, Bill Heinemann, and Walter Whitaker, were the
When you're an educator, you're encouraged to write and publish. Bill and I, when you get right down to it, we're teachers. We have the teacher mentality. And so to get rich off this would have been nice, but not as important as having donated something to the world of education. We get started out as entrepreneurs, and we wanted to write something and try to sell money. That's one thing. But that's how we were about. We were always about good teaching, and there was no expectation that it would be beyond that. Nobody knew anything about software. There were no people. I think people sometimes forget that it was a very different world. No screens, just teletypes. And very few people had a really good computers at all. Really wasn't much of a possibility.
February of 1995, the original creators of the game finally got some recognition. To celebrate the release of Oregon Trail 2, Mac threw an Oregon Trail themed celebration at the Mall of America. America. They invited Tom Rawlings, Bill Hyman, and Paul Dillenberger as special guests. It was the first time they were recognized for their creation of the game.
We were acknowledged as the original writers, creators of the program. We were invited to come, and we were given jean jackets which said Trailhead on the back, and we were taking copies of the CD-ROM, the latest CD-ROM of the game. And that's the one thing that I ever received from the marketing company was the game on the jacket.
8 months later, Mech was acquired by Sonic for $370 million. Softkey, founded by Kevin O'Leary, was on an acquisition spree of educational software companies. It also bought the Learning Company, makers of the popular Reader Rabbit series. After the purchase, Softkey changed its name to the Learning Company and used it on all of their products, including Green Trail. 3 years later, the company purchased Bruderbun, makers of the Carmen San Diego games. After all of the mergers, the Learning Company became the second largest independent consumer software company, behind only Microsoft. Meanwhile, the Mech offices in Minnesota continued to make games for the Learning Company. But in 1999, everything changed. Kevin O'Leary finalized the sale of the Learning Company to toy giant Mattel for an astonishing $3.8 billion instead. He would stay on as president of the new software division of the company. Mattel hoped the purchase would add $50 million to its quarterly profits. But Mattel grossly overvalued the Learning Company, seemingly ignoring its aging games and declining sales. Instead of adding profit, Mattel lost $105 million in the third quarter of 1999. In the fourth quarter, they lost another $184 million. Kevin O'Leary cashed those stocks in the subsequent
A documentary on a video game. Have you looked at that one? It changed the world. How's your day going? Excellent. You need me here for you, okay, good dog?
subsequently fired. As a result of financial losses, Mattel permanently closed the Mech offices in Minnesota. Later, Business Week called Mattel's purchase of the Learning Company one of the worst business deals of all time. Meanwhile, the people who created the Oregon Trail games went on with their lives. In 1990, John Rutledge left Mech. His career in the educational technology sector. He worked for Johnson's Learning for a while before finally starting his own consulting business. Paul Dillenberger worked as a math teacher and consultant in the Minneapolis school system for 30 years. Today, he's enjoying retirement.
To see it, his family thing, he needed by how many people. Certainly, there was no thought of, let's make something that's going to change the world. I guess that's just kind of a thing. A lot of things happen because they have the being planned.
Bill Hyman followed his passion. He worked in Minnesota's bustling computing industry before retiring. And in his spare time, he continues to try to make learning fun.
So I coached math before and after, and I coached chess teams. You learn so much from playing games. I learned how to figure out 10% lines. So, intelligence and phenomenal. But when you get across things. So I moved to Italy from them in 1971. I was something you don't have to do.
After completing one of the number lectures in 1986, Philip Bouchard left Limerick and did some freelance board games, books, parody games, musical, and more.
Over and over, you see T-shirts or other memes of it. You have done dysentery. The interesting thing, though, is that phrase, "died of dysentery," doesn't have to appear in the product. Instead, it will say, "Sarah has dysentery." And then a little bit later on, you see another message that says, "Sarah has died." Furthermore, even if you team leader die, it gets you by your name. So if you're the team leader, fill up this, you're coming. So they're in the same, you died of dysentery. But in me, that's captured is what's happening in the game. So it's a good thing in that regard.
In 2016, the Strong National Museum of Learning recognized the importance of the Oregon Trail and inducted it into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. It was the first game inducted that was created for educational purposes.
We were very proud of the fact that we're there, but still, Space Invaders, all those games. Where's the one that have so many people in back? I know we're after the computer program. Oh, that was a junior high experience. That's what we're for. Parties. There's always that. We're doing history class.
For more than 50 years, the Oregon Trail has taught students about the perilous journey people made in the 1800s for a better life. It's given educators new ways to teach children by incorporating games and technology into the classroom and help bring about a whole new software industry. But above all, it taught us that learning can be fun. The Cold War raged between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Major economic and political differences created a constant state of tension between the former allies. While the United States experienced unprecedented economic growth, that war led to the highly anticipated Macintosh personal computer. Los Angeles hosted the 1984 Summer Olympics. Two major blockbusters in theaters, Ghostbusters and Gremlins. Bruce Springsteen released his most successful record, Born in the USA. The nation grew and prospered, socially and economically. The communist Soviet Union was a stark contrast. The economy was stagnant. The price of oil, the country's main exports, declined. The country boycotted the 1984 Summer Olympics, citing anti-Soviet hysteria. General Secretary Konstantin Chernenko was terminally killed Khrushchev when in place. The country was 5 years into the conflict in Afghanistan. Citizens grew frustrated and had little money. The government enacted sweeping reforms to eradicate dissent and restore order. The two nations could have been more divided. But that summer, the computer programmer in the Soviet Union created something special. It was a puzzle that took the video game industry by storm and helped break the boundaries between the two superpowers. Pajitnov was born on March 14, 1956, in Moscow. His mother was a journalist who reported on cinema, a somewhat controversial art form in the Soviet Union. His father was a philosopher, a writer, and a dissident of the communist regime. When Pajitnov was 11, his parents divorced. From then on, he and his mother lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment. But their time together introduced him to pop culture. As a writer, his mother regularly attended the Moscow International Film Festival. Sometimes she brought him to Elysium, introduced him to films from around the world. He loved James Bond. He also loved math puzzles and board games, one of the few forms of entertainment available to children of the Soviet Union. One of his favorites was pentominoes. The goal of the game is to arrange 12 unique puzzle pieces consisting of 5 blocks each toward a circle. As a child in the 60s, the competition of space exploration between the United States and the Soviet Union. The USSR recruited scientists and engineers to give them an advantage. They hoped to draw children into the field by showing off the latest technology. As a result, 17-year-old Pajitnov was introduced to the computer and left a lasting impression on him. He enrolled at the Moscow Institute of Aviation, where he earned his master's degree in mathematics. After graduating, Pajitnov joined the famous Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow, where he led in a research position in the Dorothy Computing Center. But the Computing Center wasn't exactly at the forefront of technology. All employees used the same road-sized mainframe computer. Work conditions weren't ideal either. Pajitnov shared his desk with 3 other researchers. He followed the same routine almost every day. Wake up between 7:30 and 8 a.m., eat a breakfast of sausage, eggs, and cottage cheese, run some errands, then arrive at the computing center by 10. He worked until midnight, which gave him some alone time in the evenings. Eventually, Pajitnov and a few other employees got an upgrade, their own personal Control-60 computer workstation. It was a huge upgrade over the giant mainframe computers, but to the rest of the modern world, it was ancient. The Electronica 60 was a clone of an LSI computer. The system that came out 9 years prior. The display didn't show any graphics, only alphanumeric characters. Pajitnov worked on artificial intelligence programs and speech recognition software. The latter caught the attention of the KGB, Russia's security agency. They hoped it could record phone conversations. With the team, Pajitnov and a few other researchers made the computers to themselves to work on their own side projects. One programmer was obsessed with Pac-Man, a few arcade games to make its way against the higher hurdle. Others tried to reverse engineer. There was also Dmitry Pavlovsky, a fellow researcher and friend who programmed several games on the giant mainframe computer stored away in the computing center. There was also a 16-year-old programming prodigy named Vadim Gerasimov. After impressing his computer science teacher, he was brought to the computing center to learn more about programming and assist with projects. Pavlovsky introduced Gerasimov to Alexei Pajitnov. The trio shared a love of computer games and programming, so they formed a team and brainstormed game ideas in the evenings. They hoped to package the games and possibly sell them, an extremely difficult endeavor in the Soviet Union. Pajitnov sat at his desk late into the night brainstorming. He thought back to his childhood when he spent hours playing pentominoes. Surely there was a way to translate this experience to the computer. Pajitnov made adjustments to the standard pentomino game to accommodate for his outdated equipment. He cut the 5-block shapes down to 4 and reduced the number of pieces from 12 to 7. In 6 days, Pajitnov completed his first version. He named it Genetic Engineering. The goal was simple: arrange the pieces until they fit into a box. It worked, but there was just one problem. It was boring. Once a player figured out the solution, they had no reason to play again. The game needed to challenge and engage the player. So Pajitnov made the game more hectic. He narrowed the playing field to the center of the screen and had the pieces fall constantly. It was definitely more engaging and fast-paced, but that created a new problem. If you failed to complete a row, it stayed on the screen. If you completed a row, it stayed on the screen too. It wasn't satisfying, and the game ended too quickly. Pajinov's next modification made the game addictive. As soon as the player filled in an entire row, it disappeared. The game could potentially last forever. Fitting the puzzle pieces together was a satisfying feat. Suddenly, he couldn't stop playing this new game. He even played during work hours, Tetris was more addictive than ever before. However, the dream of selling a collection of games was falling apart. Starting a business, let alone a software business, was highly unusual in the Soviet Union. Plus, they made Tetris at the Russian Academy of Sciences, which technically made the game government property. Pajitnov, Pavlovsky, and Gerasimov didn't want to see their hard work go to waste. They named their collection of games Computer Frontier and made copies, which they distributed to whoever was interested. One such person was Vladimir Kobenko, Alexei Pajinov's friend and a clinical psychologist at the Moscow Medical Center. When he fired up Tetris at his workstation, he immediately recognized the addictive nature of the game. As rows of blocks disappeared, it gave the player an emotional high, fueling them to keep playing. Kyuko made copies of the game for his fellow employees. Soon the entire psychology department was hooked. Kyuko feared the game would interfere with their work, so he destroyed every copy in the medical center. But the game found its way back. Rather than fight it, Kyuko thought the game could be useful in studying addiction. A unique two-player version was developed specifically for the Moscow Medical Center by Pajitnov and Gerasimov. By 1986, Tetris spread like wildfire throughout the Soviet Union. Almost anyone with access to an IBM PC had some form of the game. Pajitnov didn't make a penny, but he was excited about the popularity of the game. But it was only the beginning. Eventually, Tetris made its way outside the Soviet Union, which ignited an epic battle to cash in on the most paid. With its simple and addictive gameplay mechanics, Tetris took over the free time of Soviet workers. One such person is Alexei Pajinov's boss. He shared a copy with some colleagues at the SCKI Institute of Computer Science in Budapest, Hungary. They loved it. Some students at the institute even ported the game to the Commodore 64 and Apple II, two popular home computers in the Western world. With that, Tetris officially crossed the Iron Curtain. In a sense, Hungary was the Western world's closest connection to Soviet life. It was under communist rule, but after the 1956 revolution, the Hungarian government passed major economic reforms to create a more open, free market. One of Hungary's most popular exports was the Rubik's Cube, created by Erno Rubik in 1974. Hungary was the place to go for business people to license Eastern products to Western audiences. One such businessman was Robert Stein, owner of the British software company Andromeda Software. After selling computer hardware in the 80s, Stein switched to a much more profitable business, selling software. But rather than look for potential new use in the UK, he found his talent in his native country of Hungary. His business model was simple: find a game, sell it to a publisher in the West, and collect royalties on the sales. Stein frequently visited the SCKI Institute of Computer Science for new titles, and in 1986, he noticed someone playing a game in the corner of the computer lab. It was Tetris. What the hell is this? He asked. Oh, it's just a game, the employee replied. Intrigued, Stein tried the game for himself. He wasn't a gamer, but he couldn't stop playing Tetris. It was a surefire hit. He immediately went to the director of the institute and inquired about licensing. But the director sheepishly admitted that the game wasn't theirs. If Stein wanted to license Tetris, he'd have to make a deal with the Soviet Union. But that was easier said than done. Russia's economy was still very closed off. The chances of Stein simply flying to Moscow and brokering a deal was slim to none. But the director did have one line of communication. He had the number to the Russian Academy of Sciences telex machine. Stein sent a telex message stating that he wanted to acquire the rights to Tetris. The message was forwarded to the creator, Alexei Pajitnov. Pajitnov was shocked. He'd given up the idea of selling software. Now he had an offer in writing for the rights to Tetris, but he had to be cautious. He made Tetris, but he had no authority to negotiate for the rights to the game. We could do nothing for personal gain, he said. It would, however, be a huge accomplishment to have the game published. After several weeks of getting translations and the proper authorization, Pajitnov sent the following reply. Yes, we are interested. We would like to have this deal. For Pajitnov, it was a way of saying, let's talk more about this. He Microsoft and Spectrum Holobyte worked together, regularly sharing titles and publishing games in their respective regions. Spectrum Holobyte president Phil Adam was in the UK looking at new titles when McConaughey showed him Tetris. He too became addicted. From there, Robert Stein made a deal with the Maxwell Corporation. Microsoft got the home computer and console rights to Tetris for the UK and Europe for £3,000 plus royalties. Spectrum Holobyte got the rights for the US and Japan for $11,000 plus royalties. It wasn't a huge payday for Stein, but he did have other rights to sell, including the arcade and handheld rights. The bigger problem, however, was Stein's supposed deal with Pachikov in the computing center in Moscow. He had the vague telex message about making a deal, but nothing was signed. Technically, he was negotiating the rights to a game he didn't even own. With contracts pending with Microsoft and Spectrum Holobyte, the clock was ticking. Stein sent off another telex message to Moscow with his offer: $10,000 up front, along with 75% on whatever money he made from Tetris. Pachikov replied once again with a vague but positive response. They were ready to make a deal. Stein kept pressing, even over partial payment in the form of Commodore computers. But just as Pachikov predicted, the Soviet regime intervened in the negotiations. Academy Soft, an internal publishing and licensing group within the Russian Academy of Sciences, handled further negotiations. Academy Soft insisted that the only rights available to Stein were for the IBM PC version of Tetris. Stein agreed. Future versions of Tetris could be negotiated for later. It was now 1987, and there were still no signed contracts. Spectrum Holobyte and Microsoft prepared their versions of Tetris under the assumption that all the rights were secure. Robert Stein grew frustrated. Who exactly was in charge of the negotiations on the Russian side? Stein had a verbal agreement, or so he thought, but he needed pen and paper in order to make his dealings with Microsoft and Spectrum Holobyte legit. So Stein put pressure on the Russians. In April of 1987, he sent another telex message to Moscow, this time announcing that Microsoft and Spectrum Holobyte would release Tetris for the IBM PC in their respective regions. But his forcefulness got him nowhere. In June of 1987, Stein finalized the deals with Spectrum Holobyte and Microsoft for Tetris. But he still had to get the Russians to sign on the dotted line. Robert Stein assured Spectrum Holobyte and Microsoft that he would secure a deal with the Russians, so the two companies moved forward with Tetris. But marketing was a big issue. Tetris was an addictive game, but it was unlike any other game on the market. There was no story or hero. The graphics were cutting edge. Phil Adam, president of Spectrum Holobyte, noted that Tetris was the first Russian game to be commercialized in North America. Why not use this to their advantage? He proposed Tetris be marketed as an exotic game from the mysterious world behind the Iron Curtain. It would surely tap into the public's curiosity about the Soviet Union. The game was completely reprogrammed to incorporate allusions to Russia. The developers added imagery of St. Basil's Cathedral, Lenin Stadium, and May Day celebrations in Red Square. They incorporated classical Russian music. They even added a reference to Matthias Rust, a German pilot who flew a small plane directly into Red Square. He was arrested and charged with hooliganism. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev impersonators showed off the game at trade shows. The Tetris hype grew as release day approached. But right before Tetris launched, in January of 1988, Robert Stein received a telex message from another organization in Russia. The group accused Stein of selling Tetris illegally and demanded that further negotiations go through them. They were known as ELORG. ELORG was short for Electronic Org Technica. The Soviet Ministry of Foreign Trade formed ELORG for the purpose of importing and exporting technology, specifically to other communist nations. In the 1980s, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, restrictions on foreign trade in the West loosened. ELORG was now free to seek licensing deals for technology internationally. This included computer software. ELORG learned that some of the researchers at the Russian Academy of Sciences were creating computer programs, including Pagetnof's artificial intelligence software. Ellsworth met with Pagetnof to see if the program could be sold internationally. During the meeting, Pagetnof casually mentioned Tetris and how the Academy soon had trouble getting a licensing deal with Robert Stein. Representatives to negotiate international software they demanded all the paperwork be handed over. What they learned was incredible. A researcher at the Russian Academy of Sciences was negotiating an international business deal for a video game. Not only that, but it was about to be sold in the West, and nothing had been signed. From that point on, Ellsworth was in charge of all negotiations for Tetris. They asked Robert Stein to come to Moscow to explain himself. When he arrived, Stein said it felt like an interrogation. Representatives from Ellsworth didn't trust him. Why are you selling Tetris without our permission? He asked. I didn't even know your group existed, Stein replied. He held his ground, arguing that pulling the deal now could be an embarrassment to the USSR, as it would make them seem unreliable in the world economy. The two sides went back and forth in what seemed like a never-ending game of tennis. Ellsworth wanted final approval over any of the games. Stein wanted the rights to all computer systems, not just the IBM PC. The two sides continued to negotiate. Nothing had been signed. But in the West, Tetris moved forward. On January 29, 1988, Spectrum Holobyte released Tetris for $34.95. It came in a red box with the word Tetris written in Russian in bold yellow characters. It stood out from the other games. The Russian marketing angle worked brilliantly. Spectrum Holobyte sold 100,000 copies in the first year. In the UK, Microsoft sold fewer, but still a sizable amount. Then again, they also removed a lot of the Russian imagery from their version. The reviews were glowing.
Tetris is so simple to learn that you'll know all the rules 5 minutes after opening the buttons. But it's so intriguing to play that once you've started, you'll be spending many hours in front of the computer screen. So many that you'll begin to wonder if Tetris isn't really part of a diabolical plot hatched in the evil empire to more worker productivity in the United States. Dennis Lynch, Chicago Tribune.
As computer games go, it is simple and addictive. Critics say thanks to guns and explosions and mayhem that appeal to young consumers of American entertainment software. But then, Soviet software is apparently still flying. Peter Lewis, the New York Times. Tetris fever enveloped the West and was being played at home and at work. Spectrum even added a boss key to it. Pressing the escape button would quickly bring up a blank command prompt. To Spectrum Holobyte and Microsoft, it was a resounding success. But Robert Stein was nervous. His deal with the Russians was still in limbo. Spectrum Holobyte and Microsoft began porting the game to other computer platforms. But finally, in May of 1980, 4 months after Tetris hit the market, Ellsworth and Robert Stein made a deal. Andromeda Software got the rights to Tetris for home computer systems. They also got the rights to port Tetris to, quote, different types of computers. This time, this meant home consoles as well. Ellsworth received an undisclosed amount up front, as well as royalties on every game sold. Stein breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly phoned Jim McConaughey at Microsoft, confirming the deal was officially done. When McConaughey asked about the market and handheld rights, Stein assured him that deal was imminent as well. From there, they wove a tangled web of sub-licenses that would ultimately turn into a ferocious battle over who could do what with Tetris. In January of 1988, Spectrum Holobyte showed off their new product at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Spectrum Holobyte President Phil Adams stood proudly on the showroom floor, displaying Tetris to a long line of attendees. Standing in that line was Hank Rogers, owner of Japanese game publisher Bulletproof Software. Rogers was born in the Netherlands, but grew up in the United States. While in college at the University of Hawaii, he fell in love with a Japanese woman and moved back Japan. So there he stood, waiting in line to play an odd-looking new game from Russia, Tetris. He wasn't quite sure what to make of it. Tetris was probably the quietest game at the show. Even then, products were graphically exciting, but this game was a totally different thing. I wanted to play it because it struck some basic chord. I couldn't stop playing. After going through the line more than 5 times to play, Rogers was convinced. Tetris was the game he was looking for. It was simple, seemed easy to program, and would require little translation. Rogers learned that Gilman Louis, the CEO of Spectrum Holiday, was going to Japan to shop the game. Gilman Louis' first stop was the ASCII Corporation, one of the largest publishers in Japan. They declined Tetris, saying it was too retro. Their loss was Rogers' game. Gilman Louis and Hank Rogers signed a letter of intent for bulletproof software to publish Tetris in Japan for just about every playthrough imaginable. Rogers' offer was standard, a cash advance, as well as royalties on every copy sold. Spectrum Holiday had no plans for getting into the Japanese market, and Rogers seemed more than capable of delivering Tetris to the country. When Gilman Louis phoned Jim McConaughey at Microsoft to tell him the news, he received a surprise. Rogers couldn't have the console arcade rights for Japan because those were already sold. The buyer was Atari Games, which planned to publish the games under their subsidiary, Tengen. Like everyone else, engineers at Atari Games were playing the PC version of Tetris and were addicted. It became common water cooler talk at the office, which motivated Atari Games to grab the rights. To make matters worse for Rogers, Atari Games got it for a steal. In exchange for console and arcade rights in Japan and North America, Atari Games gave Microsoft the PC rights to Blasteroids, a shallow update of the arcade game Asteroids. No royalties or cash to consider. Gilman Louis was furious, but there was nothing he could do. Microsoft had more power thanks to their connection to the Maxwell Corporation. Louis phoned Hank Rogers to give him the news. Rogers could have the PC rights, but if he wanted the console arcade rights, he would have to contact Atari Games. When Rogers contacted them and inquired about the rights, Atari Games declined. Undeterred, Rogers flew to California and camped out at the Atari Games parking lot. He waited for an opportunity to talk to their president, Yuki Nakajima. As Nakajima was leaving for the day, Rogers swooped in and made his sales pitch. Eventually, Nakajima agreed to a meeting. Over a sushi dinner, the two businessmen hashed out the details. Nakajima couldn't sell the arcade rights. He had already sold them to Sega, but he was willing to sell the console rights in Japan. Nakajima didn't care too much about having the console rights in Japan because he was focusing on the North American market. The price tag was steep. Rogers had to cough up $300,000 for the console rights, but he was confident the game was a hit. However, initial sales in Japan were low. Bulletproof software only received 40,000 orders. Rogers contacted Nintendo President Hiroshi Yamauchi in hopes that he could help push the game. Yamauchi was curious, so he passed Tetris down to one of his designers, Shigeru Miyamoto. Several days later, Yamauchi asked Miyamoto if Tetris was a good game. Yes, replied Miyamoto. When Yamauchi asked why, Miyamoto responded, because your secretaries and accountants are playing. With that, Yamauchi understood Tetris's universal appeal, and he agreed to help push sales of Tetris. Orders increased from 40,000 to over 200,000. On December 22nd, 1988, Bulletproof Software released Tetris for the Nintendo Famicom, where it became their best-selling game of all time, selling 2 million copies. But it added yet another branch to a complicated tree of licensing and sub-licensing. Everything hinged on one contract, Robert Stein's deal with the Russians at Delaware, and that deal was in jeopardy. In 1988, Nintendo was on top of the video game world. They were on pace to sell 7 million Nintendo Entertainment Systems a year. Industry experts predicted the market for Nintendo games was larger than all home computer software, and they weren't done yet. stores in Redmond, Washington. When Rogers heard about their situation, he suggested Tetris. If you include Mario, the Game Boy will be for little boys. But if you include Tetris, the Game Boy will be for everybody, he said. Amikawa was intrigued. He heard about the success of Tetris for the Famicom in Japan. Nintendo was preparing to release Tetris for the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America, but the handheld rights were still up for grabs. Rogers was more than happy to help. He knew he could make millions in this field, especially if Tetris was a packet title. After his experience getting the Tetris rights in Japan, he knew that Albert Stein was the man to talk to. Rogers called Stein and inquired about the handheld rights to Tetris. He offered $25,000 to convince Stein, who still didn't have the handheld or arcade rights, was also fielding calls from Microsoft asking for the handheld rights. He was wishy-washy in his response. To check the questions and get back to Rogers. Stein was about to hit another roadblock. Somewhere in the tangled web of licensing, Apple wasn't getting paid. They texted Senator Nikolai Belikov, sorting out the mess. Belikov was a large man with a reputation for being cutthroat. Belikov described him as an excellent